Let's talk money, Northern money during the Civil War. At the start of the Civil War, your wallet might contain some coins and some paper money. Your paper money would look quite different because you might have various different paper money. It was all printed by state banks, railroads, canals, and other such organizations. There was so many different kinds, people say up to 9,000, that there was actually a book that people would reference. When you handed them money, they'd look at it and did they know the bank? Did they know the organization? They might give you full value. If it was from states far away, they might refuse it altogether. And if it was somewhere in between, they would look at the book, decide if it was a counterfeit and they wouldn't take it, or decide, I'll give you 80 cents for this one. So haggling over money and whether people are going to accept the money was a standard practice. This paper money was also larger than our current money, as you can see here. Now, let's talk about those coins. The coins were much more readily accepted and valued by folks. The reason being is twofold. One, the coins were all minted by the federal government, and two, the coins actually were worth pretty much close to the identical worth of the metal contained within the coins. So worst comes if for some reason the government collapsed, you could sell the metal on the open market and people could melt it down and turn it into something else. So in the past, and there had been several financial panics, there was a financial panic in 1819, 1837, 1857. In the past, people started hoarding the coins because they knew that those coins would retain their value no matter what. What coins were there? There was a 1-cent coin, virtually identical to our modern penny, though containing more copper, and there was a bunch of silver coins, a 3-cent, a 5-cent, 10 cents, 25 cents, 50 cents, and a $1. Then there was the gold coins, also a $1, a $2, a $3, a $5, a $10, and a $20 gold coin. When the war hit, less and less of these coins were available in the market because people started hoarding them. The dates when exactly the coins became unavailable is unclear. It is clear by 1862 there was no federal coins whatsoever on the market. Now, this had happened before in the 1830s, and what folks did is actually businesses started coining their own pennies. At this time, these were larger pennies because the penny changed size in 1856, and these they call hard time tokens. The same thing started during the Civil War, and businesses started printing up what are called Civil War tokens, and they're identical in size to the penny, although they contain significantly less copper. So they actually cost a fraction of a penny to create, and people say that people were actually minting money. We know that these started in Chicago in 1860 and in New York in 1861, and by 1862 they were pretty much widespread throughout the Midwest and the East. And businesses printed them and coin makers printed them. So there was store tokens that had a store on it, and there was patriotic tokens. And there's all sorts of varieties. Again, thousands and thousands of examples of these Civil War tokens. Additionally, stamps were used as currency for a small amount of time, and there was actually stamp holders made because stamps are hard to pass around. So that's really why the tokens took off. The federal government first got into the market of making and printing paper currency in 1861 with demand notes. Demand notes meant that you could take this note to the bank and demand coins in payment for the currency or the piece of paper. And this is actually the same way the state bank notes worked. If you went to that state bank and handed them the piece of paper, they were required to give you coins in return. Now, being that in 1861 coins were pretty darn precious, this didn't work so well because people would get the paper currency and immediately turn around and go to the bank if they could and demand or coins for it. To address this problem, the government started printing something called fractional currencies, which were paper currencies were both smaller in amount and size, in 1862. They continued to print these actually through 1872. But in 1864, they outlawed both the creation and the use of the Civil War tokens, rendering these worthless. In 1862, the federal government issued United States notes. These were the first ones that were called legal tender, and these were, you could not take them to a bank and demand coins for them, but they should be, and everyone was required to take them as equal money. In 1863, they also issued licenses in a new law for new national banks. And so in 1863, national bank currency was printed. Now these looked almost identical, but there was a bank name in one little section of it. Now, what about those state notes? Well, the state notes continued to be used. And according to references, they actually became worthless in 1866 when the federal government passed a law taxing those from the bank, and they immediately came out of circulation. In addition, there was one more type of currency, paper currency, that was available, and these are interest-bearing notes. Now, the interest-bearing notes were only issued in very large denominations and only a few times. The goal was to have these large denominations be worth something and to have people keep them in a currency format, a paper currency format. So they issued several different times and different lengths, and they had compound interest. So if you turned them in at the very end, you would get more than the face value of the currency. Soldiers were paid in whichever currency was the most recent at that time period, and they often mailed their pay home in the U.S. Postal Service. Sort of surprising. Nowadays we wouldn't, but remember, in this day there was no such thing as a personal check, Western Union, or anything else. So you popped that pay in your envelope and mailed it home and hoped for the best, because your wife at home might need the money. There's several references in Cora Beach Benton's letters to her husband about receiving $20, receiving $10, receiving his pay. So just a little fascinating tidbit of and how people would have talked about money at the time. So, depending on what year you're reenacting, we'll answer the question to what's in your wallet.